One Pride Nation, what is going on? Welcome to the Lions Pulse. I am your host, Miko, and we are here to talk all things Detroit Lions, Lions news, Lions rumors, everything that's been going on with the Lions as of lately. And I'm super excited to be back. Had an awesome weekend. Well, okay weekend. My wife was actually pretty sick over the weekend, so Mother's Day wasn't as exciting as we're normally used to it being, but still had a good weekend. Got to obviously spend time with the family, with everybody being at home, and again, I'm super excited to get in here, talk Lions. Um, Rookie minicamp was this past weekend, so we're definitely going to get in there and talk about the rookie minicamp. But before I actually go through this whole entire rundown of what we're going to talk about, please, if you are hanging out with me today, before we get too deep into the weeds, if you could do me a favor, hit that like button. It really helps out the channel. As where I'm continuing to trying to grow this and have it be something that the community can really enjoy. Um, any type of support that you guys can give. You guys actually gave so much support over the weekend. Obviously, I was uploading videos like crazy, and the amount of support that I got from people jumping in the comment section, liking the video, subscribing was insane. So definitely appreciate everybody that took out the time this past weekend to just show love to the channel. But if you can continue to show that love, like this stream, be sure to jump in the chat. Let me know who's hanging out with me so that I can be able to engage with you and be able to give you a shout out as well. But like I said, we have so many things to talk about. We definitely going to dive into Lions rookie minicamp, which took place this past weekend. There were some good things that came out of rookie minicamp, and some not so good things that come out of rookie minicamp that I definitely want to touch on. Obviously, we have the news about the Lions adding another joint practice. So I have a couple questions about that or a couple concerns. So we'll definitely dive into that as well. And then last week, the NFL dropped the schedule for the 2023 season. I did a quick stream where I was just reacting to the news initially and gave my thoughts, just again, off of just first reaction of seeing the schedule. So obviously, we're going to go ahead and I've had some time to digest the schedule and I want to be able to kind of retract some things because I think I might have jumped a little too soon and I give you my, prediction like many of us do when we first see the schedule. But I definitely want to dive into that. I have some questions about what this season could possibly look like. A lot of people, including myself, are expecting good things and kind of have the idea that this could be a big season for the Lions. But that doesn't mean that there aren't some pitfalls as well to be kind of on the lookout for. And if you've been checking out the last couple streams, I've been doing my rookie comparisons, giving my floor and ceiling projections for every rookie that the Lions drafted in the 2023 draft. So this week we get to jump into Hendon Hooker as well as Broderick Martin. So I'm super excited for those two. And I think you guys are going to really like kind of the way I'm kind of seeing those players and how I feel like they fit in to what the Lions are looking to do, both in the present and in the future with both of these picks. So, with all of that said, and that was very long winded. I don't think I stopped to take enough breaths in the middle of that, but let's just dive into the night and let's talk rookie minicamp. So the Detroit Lions were actually hosting their Lions rookie minicamp this past week, and I have to say there were some good things to come out of this past week, and there were some not some so good things to come out of this week. But at first, like let's focus on the good things that came out of this week. And one of those good things being the fact that like no matter where you were looking, one of the names that was definitely popping out in terms of being impressive during Lions rookie minicamp was tight end Sam Laporta. Sam Laporta, by all reports, was actually living up to the billing of being this versatile tight end that was again making all the catches. Uh, had a couple one-on-ones with Jack Campbell and really impressed. Obviously beat Jack in a couple of different ones. The one quote that I saw was that like again he beat him on one rep and like again had the swagger to actually kind of like wave goodbye to him. So you love to see that from your rookies. You love to see that somebody that you invested such a high pick in Sam Laporta being in the second round is living up to the billing, this early on and is actually like turning heads and getting people excited about what he could potentially be in this offense. So Sam is his showing in this past rookie minicamp is something to definitely be excited about. Um, I did my rookie comparison of him last week, and you can actually find that on the channel where I kind of gave his ceiling and his floor projections. And I think based off of what I was hearing coming out of the first week, I think Sam has a very good chance of living up to that ceiling of being what I compared him to be, which is Dallas Goddard. Um, his ability to line up anywhere on the field, both and in line, flexed out at wide receiver, possibly even play in the slot. Hell, they could probably even drop him, in the backfield to play a little fullback if they wanted to. Sam has that level of versatility, so it shouldn't be too big of a surprise that he's going into rookie minicamp and showing off that versatility. And so he's one of those players that like I think is really going to thrive once he gets to work with Ben Johnson, once he gets into the flow of this offense and is able to get with Jared Goff and understand exactly what this team is looking to do on a week in, week out basis. With that said, um, another player that was really impressive this past week was Jack Campbell. So again, obviously, yes, Sam beat him on a couple reps here and there, but Jack, from all reports, actually had a really good week as well, being able to take coaching well, being able to be the intelligent player that we had heard that he was, and being able to, even when he did make a mistake, Kelvin Shepard pulling him aside, being the great, linebacker coach that he is, and pulling Jack aside, correcting him, and then Jack going out and not making the same mistake twice. Again, these are rookies, and I think we sometimes forget that just because they were drafted high, just because they were drafted in the first or second round, doesn't mean that you're getting a perfect player. You're getting somebody that still needs to develop, that still needs coaching. And Jack is another guy that I did a rookie comparison on. And Jack has things in his game that he does need to work on, things that he needs to get better at. And to be able to go into rookie minicamp and to see that he's already taking coaching well, making strides, and making improvements. I mean, the highlight that we saw of him dropping in coverage, obviously it was a drill, but dropping in coverage, making a play on the ball, like that's what Jack Campbell does really well. And that's the thing that I think we're going to see a lot of him doing once the season kicks off, once we finally get into team drills. Is again, he does an amazing job of being in the right place at the right time in coverage opportunities. And if he's already taking coaching well, if Kelvin Shepard already is being able to push him and challenge him, and Jack's not folding under that pressure, it gives you a lot of confidence that hey, once he gets with the vets and he has even more people that he can lean on and offer feedback and criticism, that he's only going to be able to adjust and acclimate to this defense even faster. I believe Dan Campbell was on Good Morning Football this past week, and they were, when talking about Jack Campbell, like the expectation is for Jack to start, is for Jack to compete and to be a key part of this defense. So make rookie minicamp is the first chance that he has to be able to make that great first impression. And by all reports, he did do that. And so that's something that I'm very, very excited about. Again, for everybody that's hanging out with me, yo, drop a comment in the chat. I want to know who's hanging out with me. Be sure to like the stream. All of that stuff helps out the channel. But back to some of the other good things that are actually came out of rookie minicamp. Surprisingly enough, because I wasn't sure how much we were going to be able to hear of this person, Broderick Martin's name actually came up in a positive light as well. Again, Broderick Martin is somebody that we're going to talk about a little later in the stream when I kind of do his comparison. But rookie minicamp, like there's no pads, there's not a lot of hitting, so I wasn't sure how many good things we were going to hear about Broderick Martin because again, the best thing that you can, the best evaluation out of a defensive tackle is like, hey, is he getting pushed? Is he being physical? Is he disrupting the run? And it at least seems like from the reports that came out, he was doing that. He was actually, one of the first guys to be in line when, as far as like getting coaching, taking coaching, being the person to, showcase whatever the coaches were asking them to do. And then on top of that, so many of the writers were coming out and saying like, yo, size wise, like biggest defensive tackle that was out there. So like, again, there's no way that you can lie about those measurables. And it's something that gets you excited about his potential in the NFL is like, hey, if he's able to translate those physical traits, those physical tools, his size and his ability to eat up space, like, man, like this is somebody that they could really utilize in this defense. Brad Holmes already said back during the owners' meetings that, like, hey, Isaiah Buggs played way too many minutes. And I know Broderick Martin is not the defensive tackle that we all thought that the Lions would be targeting. But when you think about what Isaiah Buggs does really well in this defense and what they may need if they're looking to spell him or be able to split some of his snaps, Broderick Martin fits perfectly into that slot of somebody who can come in and defend the run at a really high level. So him going into rookie minicamp, getting so much hands-on coaching, and the coaches, because the Lions do have a new defensive lines coach. I completely forgot about that until I started reading some of these reports. It's like, oh yeah, they do have somebody new. So the fact that that person is taking such an interest into Broderick Martin and making sure that, like, hey, we are going to help speed up your development so that you can contribute is awesome. On top of that, Broderick Martin's attitude is something that, like, really kinda caught my eye. Again, as a guy who knows that he's coming from a small school, it would be super easy for him to take the approach of like, "Hey, I just wanna learn. I'm gonna lean on my vets, this, that, and the third," and, like, obviously, he's going to do that as well. But he also had, like, the charisma and the attitude of like, "Yo, I wanna play, like, now, though. Like, I do wanna play immediately. I wanna be on the team. I wanna be on the plane when we go to Kansas City, and I wanna be able to suit up and contribute." And I tend to think like that's when you take a defensive tackle, or when you take any type of player in the third round, obviously Hendon Hooker aside, when you typically take players in those first 3 rounds, you're looking for guys to contribute. You're looking for guys to contribute almost immediately, whether it's on offense, defense, or even possibly special teams, which is kind of where I see Brian Branch, which we're going to talk about in a minute, kind of where I see him probably making his initial impact just because of how stacked that secondary is. So shout out to Mark LeVay saying Broderick Martin reminds me of Forrest Whitaker. Okay, I like that. I'm not gonna lie to you. I'm gonna talk about it later, Mark. As far as again, my comp for Broderick Martin. Broderick Martin was a hard comp for me. I'm not gonna lie, and it's not because well, it's for two reasons. One, because he plays nose tackle, and there's not a lot of like dominant nose tackles to be like, oh, he reminds me of this guy. Um, and on the secondly, like it was hard to find Western Kentucky tape where again it's him being singled out and being able to just break down what he's doing well. Um, but I was able to like, kind of power through it. And I think you guys will like the comp, or you may not like the comp. I don't know when we get to it later in the show. um so yeah, that's some of the good that came out of rookie minicamp. Also, the news broke today that the Lions did sign one of their UDFA's, Dylan Drummond, wide receiver out of Eastern Michigan. So again, adding some wide receiver depth to that wide receiver room. We all know that JMO's serving a 6-game suspension. They recently cut Stanley Berryhill, who was also going to be serving a suspension. So the fact that again they went into rookie minicamp, they found another receiver that they at least feel like good about bringing into camp and seeing if he can at least compete for a spot is a really good sign for this team going forward. Perry Ball says he's a developer defensive tackle. I'm assuming you mean developmental defensive tackle, and that's probably true. He is definitely going to need, like you said, he will need some coaching up. Absolutely. I think again when we get to the comp, Broderick Martin physically has the tools that you like in a defensive tackle. I think if you just saw him, no stats, no school attached to him, and you just simply said, like, hey, this is the defensive tackle you're getting in the third round, you would be like super excited about the measurables, the size, and everything. It's once you slap the school on him and once you start looking at stats, you're just like, wait, these two things don't add up. Western Kentucky, when there was guys from, Georgia, Baylor, Kalijah Cansey out of Pitt, like when there were other guys that were on the chart, you start to kind of feel like, well, maybe the Lions reached. And again, I don't want to go too deep into my comp too early, but we are going to talk about it and I'll give my thoughts on it. Shout out to Big T in the building saying, what up, though? Hashtag Pride Nation and Miko. What's good with you, Big T? Let me know how your weekend was. Let me know how all of your weekends were as we kind of go through this conversation about the Lions and rookie minicamp and everything else. So yeah, that was some of the good stuff that came out of rookie minicamp. There was one bad thing, and again, it's hard to have a lot of bad things come out of rookie minicamp because again, it's rookie minicamp. There's not a lot of installation going on. It's a lot of focus on getting these guys caught up and preparing them so that when they finally start to mesh with the vets, that there's a smooth transition over. Well, the one bad thing that came out of this was the one thing I said I did not want to hear when it came to rookie minicamp. And that one bad thing was there were some injuries. Now, the injuries were minor. I don't want to overreact and make it seem like, yo, this person is out for a severe amount of time. And I don't want to, make some type of leaps that like, well, because this person's hurt and this other person used to be hurt all the time, that there's a correlation between the two. I don't want to do that. But I will say, hearing that there were injuries, again, a day after the guys were on the field and that guys were sitting out was a little annoying. simply because, and I think Brian Branch said it best, when these guys aren't on the field, they miss out on opportunities to get better. They miss out on those physical reps to be able to understand what the coaches want them to do and how they want them to execute certain play calls or understand certain positioning and formations. They miss out on that. Now they're obviously on the sidelines and they can observe everything. You can take those mental reps. Those mental reps are important, but suffering injuries, specifically Jameer Gibbs suffering a minor ankle injury, and then Brian Branch, I can't remember exactly what they say what his injury was, but again, there's obviously the notion that the Lions are just taking a very like cautious approach to both of these guys, not wanting them to like suffer any further injuries and be, further banged up when OTAs and training camp take on. I'm cool with it. I understand like the precaution, but again, the fact that initial injuries happen wasn't something I wanted to hear. And that's not to blame anybody. If you guys were here last week, Luke was saying like, yo, if somebody got hurt, somebody needs to be fired. I get that injuries happen. Things can happen all the time. A guy cuts the wrong way and, just lands on his ankle the wrong way or goes up for a pass and something crazy can happen. I understand that. But hopefully like these injuries that occurred aren't all that serious so that again, these rookies can get into the flow with these vets and really like adjust and become acclimated to the NFL game. Shout out to my guy Steve-O saying rookie minicamp is just an orientation with football pads on. Again, I agree. I don't think they actually wear pads during rookie minicamp because again, I think the idea is to limit the amount of contact and the amount of wear and tear on these guys. But yeah, it is just an orientation. So like there's nothing like drastically big or small to like be upset about. Um, but I definitely did like again reading the observations that were coming out. I think there were some good things to kind of be encouraged by. Again, Sam Laporta's performance, Jack Campbell being able to take on coaching really well, and then again Broderick Martin being coached up and kind of being the focal point of like for all the other defensive tackles of like this is what we want you to do, and he being utilized as that main example. So I think those were all really good things. Um, Shout out to Joel Cine saying all those interviews really showed why the Lions love these guys. They're really confident and love ball. Not gonna lie, they need to stop letting Hooker do conferences. He has me ready to buy a backup QB jersey. If Joel, I'm gonna tell you this right now. Another like little sneak peek into my breakdown because Hendon Hooker is one of the guys that we're gonna be doing the comparison of. If his interviews have you excited about him being like, have you ready to buy a backup QB jersey? When I give you this comp, you might buy one. And I didn't even do this intentionally. I will talk about it more when we get to it. But doing like a deep dive into Hendon Hooker, I will at least say I understand why Luke loves him so much. And I understand why other people love him so much and why so many people were high on him. He's not the perfect prospect, but the things that make you go wow make you really go wow. So again, we'll dive into it later, but that's kind of like those are kind of my thoughts on rookie minicamp, right? The goods were good, the bads, again, there weren't a lot of bads. Um, Again, there's a lot to like that you can't really take away from that again because they're not hitting, they're not being overly physical with each other, and on top of that, they're not going against the vets, right? They're not catching passes from Jared Goff. Um, the defense isn't going against the first team offense. Laporta isn't running routes against the first team defense and all of those things. So there's not a huge amount to take from it, but the little bit that we got, I think at least points the arrow in the right direction that makes you feel confident. Kind of like how Joel C was saying, like, you know what, that the Lions picked the right guys. And you can see why they picked the guys they did based off of their character and based off of like their work ethic and how they've approached rookie minicamp. With that said, speaking of off-season workouts, speaking of mini camps, one other piece of news that came out this past weekend is that the Lions added another joint practice with the Jacksonville Jaguars. So, for those of you who don't know, this would be the second joint practice that the Lions will be adding. The Lions already have a joint practice on the schedule to go along with the New York Giants. And in most situations, I'm not overly against joint practices because I think again it allows, especially if you have a young team or a young inexperienced team, it allows you to ramp up the level of competition um, outside of them having to play, in the preseason games, and helps them get into that mentality of being competitive earlier. One thing though that I'm like a little nervous about when it comes to the Lions adding an additional joint practice is that injuries to me are like the only thing that can really keep this team from achieving the things that we want and believe that they can achieve. And hearing that they're going to do another joint practice, obviously, like again, they're not games, they're not full speed, and obviously, like the coaches get a little more control of these situations. But I just always assume, and we always kind of know based off of what we see on social media, what we saw on Hard Knocks last year, these joint practices get physical. They get intense. They're not um as easy, like they're not as like, slow speed as your traditional practices are because again, you're going against guys that aren't your teammates. So they're the idea that like, hey, you have to throttle it back kind of like leaves the mind. And not to mention, you're looking to make an impact. You're looking to make plays because again, this is training camp. Some of these guys are still looking to earn a roster spot. And so what better way to do that than to go against somebody else and have an opportunity to really kind of let loose and shine. So it's something that like I don't think it's not a huge deal that they're adding it, but it is something like when I heard it, I was a little concerned of just like, are we possibly adding the threat of more injury or the threat of someone just again getting banged up in a situation when they don't really need to? Um, Joel C saying, bro, when the man said, "Come on, I was the offensive player of the year for a reason," man had me sold. He was going to be a backup on a mission. Golf better ball out. Listen, Joel, I'm not lying to you. When we get to this comp, I can't believe I feel the way I do about it after again how I initially felt about Hendon Hooker. So I completely understand that thought process. Shout out to my guy BD Buster saying, "What's up, man? Just got in." Uh Appreciate you guys. Appreciate you coming through, BD Buster. Also saying, light up the stream, guys. Yo, again, like BD saying, hit the like button if you haven't already. Um, like I said earlier, all of those things really help the stream, really help the channel. Let's continue to grow this thing and make it something that Lions fans everywhere can truly enjoy and find value in. Um, BD also saying, was wondering if you spoke about Clinton Williams and the possibility of Oh, you mean Quinnen Williams? No, I haven't talked about Quinnen Williams yet, but if we can take a break really quick and talk about it for a second because uh, that's kind of all I really had on joint practices. So the news broke this, I think it was this morning. Quinnen Williams, the defensive tackle for the New York Jets, had made an adjustment to his bio, I believe, on Twitter, where instead of it saying defensive tackle for the New York Jets, it just says defensive tackle dot dot dot. Basically kind of hinting that, his future is kind of up in the air. And I know everybody does it. I did it for like a split second, which is like, well, hey, if he's available, the Lions should go out and go get him. And I think that's a no-brainer, right? If Quinnen Williams is truly available, if the Jets are actually interested in trading him, Brad Holmes should do the thing that I always say he should do. Do your due diligence and at least see what the asking price is. You have a need at defensive tackle. Quinnen Williams is one of the best, the very best. And it would immediately elevate this defense to another level. You did so much investment on the secondary. We're adding a guy like Quinnen Williams, whatever the asking price, would at least seem like it's worth the investment. If it's two firsts, I can see why it's that. But if I take that part out of it, the idea that like, hey, this should be a no-brainer. Quinnen Williams, top tier defensive tackle. Lions have a need. We also always have to factor in the fact that the asking price for these types of players are high, right? Quinnen Williams, the reason why he's unhappy right now is because he wants a lot of money, right? A lot of defensive tackles got signed this offseason. I believe it was Deron Payne got signed. Um, Jeffrey Simmons got signed, and all of those guys got signed for over 90 million, as far as like the full length of the contract. So if the Lions are going to go into the sweepstakes of signing a Quinnen Williams or trading for a Quinnen Williams, I mean, well, you got to be ready to pay that price tag. Now, if we can speculate, if we can just like have fun with it for a second and let's speculate a little bit. If you were to trade for a Quinnen Williams, the easiest, like this would probably be the best time to do it because you can get out of Jared Goff's contract next year, which is honestly like the biggest holdup for anything. It's like if you're not going to if you're not going to pay Jared Goff over 45 million a year, you know, you can almost kind of treat like any move you make as like, hey, we can make these moves because we have an out. We have a way of having a cheap quarterback, and it makes it easier to make these kind of moves. Well, you could essentially cut Jared Goff next year, and once we get to the Hendon Hooker stuff, you'll understand why I'm saying this, and that you could realistically start Hendon Hooker next year and have a very, very cheap quarterback. So we're talking about a quarterback that you took in the third round. So his contract is even cheaper than that of one taken in the first round. And you have so much financial flexibility to take on a Quentin Williams contract and still have a high quality offense, have the defensive pieces that you've already kind of signed. Obviously, you'll need to re-sign some guys or go out and find some veterans to bring in to help with that secondary. But it would kind of make sense in that sense if you wanted to again kind of push all the chips to the middle of the table, and really make an like sell out for the Super Bowl essentially this year. I don't know if the Lions necessarily do that, but it's not like a far stretch. It's not hard to understand why you would do something like that. There's a lot of benefits to going after a Quentin Williams, and he's definitely worth the money, right? I think there's sometimes we kind of question like, hey, is this guy worth the money? Is he worth, 90 million and things like that? The Lions have gotten burnt on giving a guy a contract like that with Trey Flowers, but Quentin Williams has done it longer, and he's done it in a style of defense that would fit what the Lions currently do. It's not as big of a stretch as when you brought in Trey Flowers and tried to kind of fit him into a Matt Patricia style defense that wasn't working for anybody. Um, Steve was saying the Jets are going to want 2 firsts for Williams, and then they will have to give him 20 to 25 mil per season. Exactly, you are. So like, if you're selling out, right? You're going to sell out for a player of Quentin Williams, caliber. If you're going to decide to trade for him, I think he's worth the price tag. You have, like I said, you have the young nucleus that you need to be able to take on a player like this. You just drafted Hutch. You have James Houston. Um, you drafted Brian Branch, Jack Campbell. Like, you just re-signed Alex Anzalone. So like, your linebackers are set. You'll need to figure out the secondary thing as far as, are you going to draft more guys next year, or can you re-sign Emmanuel Mosley? And things of that nature. But then you still would have that depth of having, you would have Aleem, you would have Isaiah Buggs, Quentin Williams starting. We'll figure out how healthy Levi is or how healthy Levi stays. Um, and then you can kind of like you have a solid defense. Not to mention your offense is really young, and the fact that you have JMO Saint, your offensive line for the most part is taken care of. You need to figure out what you're going to do with Jonah, but you drafted a guard this year that you're developing, and hopefully he'll be able to compete for a starting spot in a couple years. And then, like I said, you have a young quarterback in the wings that's waiting, and that's a really cheap contract, so you can afford to give a lot of money to a player that, like Steve says, I think Williams is worth the price tag. Like, he is, and he would be that thing that really like puts a chokehold on this division, right? Because that's kind of the next thing we're going to kind of jump into, um, really quick. Well, actually, Joel C is actually saying that's way too rich for a defensive tackle. I'm getting out the pitchforks if Brad does this. Even if so, Joel C, let talk to me real quick. Even if it meant that you would like for sure have the best defense in the NFC North, because I think right now, I think we all are saying that the Lions have the best defense, and I feel like it's kind of by default. But I think there is an argument to be made for Green Bay having one of the better defenses, in this division. Minnesota is clearly butchering their defense. I don't know what the hell they're doing, but they clearly are just determined to just probably try to outscore people this year and not play defense. They're going to probably look a lot like our defense did a year ago. And then the Bears added some pieces, but they're in a similar boat as us, where it's like you have to see those pieces, see how well they gel, and if they're actually, going to be able to have the chemistry they need to be a high quality defense in this league. So I don't know. Like, I see your point. It's a huge price tag. It's a huge asking price, but I think for the benefit of securing your defense and making it one of the top defenses in the NFC, I don't know. I think it's kind of worth it. I think you would finally have a guy on your defense. Like I know Hutch is looked at it being the guy, but Quentin Williams would make everything easier for your defense, right? Hutch is You're not going to be able to double Hutch as much on the outside if you have to deal with Quentin Williams on the inside. If you have Quentin Williams on the inside, Jack Campbell can make more plays because you have a defensive tackle that can actually destroy blocks and keep your linebacker clean. Quentin Williams is also great at rushing the passer. I believe last year he had like 11 sacks, I believe, from a defensive tackle. Like that's great. So if you have a defensive tackle that's creating pressure in the middle, well, now your secondary can make more plays and be more locked down because quarterbacks are going to have to process and move faster based off the pressure that they're getting from your defensive line. So the domino effect of having a Quentin Williams, I think is really good. And I understand 2 first round picks is a lot to ask anybody for. Completely understand. But it's something that I think would pay off dividends, um, for this defense. Big T agreeing with me saying Q Williams will complete this defense completely. I agree. Again, we're looking to solidify a unit that again is good, is played much better down the line or down this, the stretch of the season. But if you can get those key pieces that really like puts your defense over the top, I don't know. Like sometimes you have to make those gambles. Sometimes you have to pull a Les Snead and say F these picks and just trade them away for high quality players that are still. I see the thing too, that they're still young. Quentin Williams is still very young. It's not like you're trading for a 31, 32-year-old defensive tackle. You're trading for a guy that's still in his 20s and still has a lot of football left and it has a lot of room to get better. Um, Joel C saying, I fully feel you. Lions defense with Williams is super scary on paper. That's all I'm saying, right? And sometimes you're gonna have to, make those gambles. And maybe this year is too early to make that gamble. I'll admit that, right? You had a good year last year, just barely missed out on the playoffs. Maybe you want to see what you have in this group now before you decide to start mortgaging your future to put you over the hump. Maybe you want to see if you can get over the hump on your own with this current cast of players. And I'm not going to argue with that. I'm not going to get mad at that if Brad Holmes decides to not go after Quentin Williams, which I guess I should have said in the beginning. I also don't think Quentin Williams gets traded. I think the Jets would be stupid to trade Quentin Williams. You find a way to pay a guy like that. You just do. Um, Perry Ball saying, what would I be willing to give up for him? Like I said, I would give up the 2 firsts because I think that's what a player of Quentin Williams' caliber is going to demand. You give up the 2 firsts and you see if that's enough, right? And then you make the contract fit um, with your current cap situation. Joel C saying, let's just win the division before we make these franchise changing decisions. Like I said, and I would agree with that approach, right? If Brad had this approach of like, hey, we have a lot of faith in the foundation we've built, and we believe this is enough to help us win the division and get into the playoffs and make some noise. Listen, I'm fine with it. See how far that gets you. And if it doesn't quite get you where you thought it would, I think you have to start thinking about like, okay, building through the draft is great, but if there are high quality, impactful football players out there that are available, maybe you need to start making those types of trades to be able to bring those types of players in. So Mark LeBay saying it sounds great, but I like to see the Lions continue to build in the draft. Like I said, and that's fully understandable. I'm not going to sit here and argue with anybody and say that's a dumb idea. I think there's merit to both systems. There's merit to going out and getting your guys, and then there's merit to as far as getting your guys in the draft, and then there's merit to uh being aggressive and going out and trying to acquire talent from other teams by trading away draft picks. There's also pros and cons, right? Like there's a con to that approach of just drafting because that means that process may take longer, right? If guys aren't ready to fully contribute right away and you're constantly trying to win a Super Bowl with a bunch of young guys, that's a con. But then yeah, the con of trading away draft picks is that you are mortgaging your future. And you could easily find yourself in an LA Rams situation where now you're trying to trade away good players just to be able to get draft picks so that you can start rebuilding your roster all over again. But with all that said, I did want to talk about the NFL schedule that came out last week. And so when I did my initial stream looking at the schedule and kind of like breaking down the games by game, um, I had originally had the Lions at 11-6, right? Um, and it's mainly because like the idea of saying the Lions will win 13 games is very lofty for me. Um, and it should be lofty for everybody, right? Winning 10 games is hard in the NFL. We hear that all the time that every Sunday is a tough game and just winning in general is really hard. So to say that this team will for sure win 13 of them is tough for me. It's really hard because even if I'm at my most optimistic about this team, when I look at the schedule and if you're being realistic, it's like, okay, losses are going to come from somewhere, right? And we can't just be like, oh, they'll lose to the Chiefs, they'll lose to the Chargers, and I don't know, they'll lose to the Ravens. And be like, oh, that's three losses that you can easily see. Those are the only losses they'll have. They're gonna drop a game to a team that they absolutely should not drop a game to. It happens. I remember last year when they played New England and New England was playing like crap, absolute crap at that point. And Detroit went into New England and got their teeth kicked in, and it was embarrassing, right? Because we were all as fans like, "Yo, this is the Matt Patricia revenge game. We're gonna go out there and shut them down and this, that, and the third." Mac Jones was playing like crap, and it was bad. It was bad from kickoff to the end, and that was one of the, like, hardest games to watch, even though New England wasn't that good at the time. So, it's hard to just sit here and be like, "You know what? 13 wins out the gate." However, I had some time. I looked at the schedule some more, and I'll be completely honest with you, Minnesota went out and did some dumb stuff, and I was like, "Oh, well, now you're up to 13." Like, because I think you absolutely sweep Minnesota. Um, I think you sweep the Packers. I think you may end up splitting with the Bears, and I know nobody wants to hear that you're gonna split with the Bears, but I'm not gonna sit here and forget that the Bears did have us against the ropes in that first game in Chicago, and if it's not for a Jeff Okuda pick six and kind of just giving that team life in that moment, I don't know if the Lions were gonna come back and win that game. They were not playing well, offensively or defensively at that point. So, personally, like, I think you can now get up to 13 wins. What's going to be important, though, for this team is that they start hot. The last few years, the Lions have really struggled with, having really slow starts to the season, and now you have to play catch up the rest of the year. And if we sit here and we just look at the Lions schedule for this year, like that first stretch of the season is tough, right? We know about the KC game, right? I dropped a video this past weekend talking about why we should be excited about this game, and I do think this game is winnable, but it's not a slam dunk win. I look at Seattle. I again another game that I think is winnable, but not a for sure thing. Atlanta is a game that we should win. I think, like, yeah, that's probably will be the first game I'm like super confident of us going into. Then there's Green Bay. I'm super confident in. Carolina's a revenge game after what they did to us last year. And then you have Tampa, which is another like good win. So we're talking about three games that I'm like very confident we have that we're gonna get wins in. So you have a chance of going into week 7 at 3-3, and that's before you play Baltimore. That's before you play uh LA. That's before you play Chicago. And that's before you play New Orleans or Dallas, which Dallas is a team that like I don't know why Dallas just seems to have our number, and I hate it, right? I'm sure most of you do as well. Losing to the Cowboys is one of the worst things in the world. Um, but it's not outside of the realm of possibility to get 13 wins. BD Buster saying, "What is your ceiling and floor on the win totals?" So I do think like the ceiling is 13. I don't think I can go higher than 13. I think if you start talking more than 13, yeah, I might have to accuse you of needing to be drug tested. I don't mean to do it. I don't want to do it. More than 13 wins is lofty, is extremely lofty. But I think my floor is still 11 just because this team is better. They're better defensively. They're better offensively with the weapons that they've added in Monty and in Gibbs. This offensive line will hopefully, fingers crossed, right, be actually healthy for the first time in a long time. So there's a lot of reasons to be optimistic that like, yo, double digit wins should be possible. Your division is very weak and very beatable this year. Like I said, I could see them drop a game to the Bears, but I could also see them sweep the Bears. Like it's that up and down for me. Um Mark LeBay saying, I very much want to see the Lions beat Dallas, but it'll be on a short week after being on the road the last week, and 3 of the 4 past weeks. Listen, and that's the toss up, right? With Dallas. It's all a matter of like which version of Dallas are you getting? Do you get like the Dallas that's already like going through that collapse? If you guys are ESPN fans or even Stephen A. Smith fans, are they going to live up to the billing of being a disaster waiting to happen and you get to reap the benefits of that? Or is Dallas going to be good? I put that in quotations because like Dallas is good is very similar to Minnesota's good, where it's like, sure, they might squeak into the playoffs, but they're getting bounced in the first round. So like I don't ever really know how good that actually makes them. Um Perry Ball saying, do you think it would be better to wait until teammate cuts and pick a veteran defensive tackle? Yeah, going back to the defensive tackle conversation, yeah. I mean, I think when you look at what this team has on the defensive line, you know Aleem's going to be solid. You know Isaiah Bugg's going to do his job. You're betting high on Broderick Martin, and then after that, like everything else is a question mark. Is Levi going to be healthy? If he is, awesome. Then you can slide him into the rotation. Benito Jones didn't do a whole lot, but he's still here. So is he finally going to take a step forward? Who knows? I'll be honest with you, Perry Ball. My hope and my wish is that the Lions have such an amazing season that by like week 10, so like right after the bye going into LA, they're able to sign Sue. It's a pipe dream, I know. But being able to get Sue when the Lions have like, maybe they only have 1 or 2 losses and it's like, yo, this team can actually go to the playoffs. I don't know. Call up Sue. He seems to love Detroit. See if he wants to come back and make one more run in Detroit at the playoffs and be a part of history and winning a Super Bowl. Like I think that would be awesome. Um BT Buster in regards to Seattle. Seattle had an amazing draft, and that's one of the reasons why like I'm concerned. Like it was a back and forth game with Seattle last year, right? And it's one of those games where you're just like, if the defense, the defense showed a little bit of life, right? If there was just like a small heartbeat in that game for the defense, that Seattle game is goes in the favor of the Lions. Jared Goff was dealing that day. They played, I believe they were playing at home as well, which they'll be doing this year. And he was in his bag that day. And you just like it was a couple mistakes. I think Jared Goff threw a pick six that game, and the defense just never stopped the bleeding. And that's how Seattle gets that win. I want to believe that the Lions will be better prepared for this game this year. But again, it's a game that like you're side eyeing. You're looking at where you're like, all right, they could beat Seattle, but they could also be a repeat of last year. Um, Big T, I think you're saying this in regards to the division. Yeah, we went 5-1 last year. We literally can go 6-0 in the division. I think that's the ceiling, right? I think you absolutely could go 6-0, but some of these teams I'm not necessarily sleeping on. I'm not sleeping on the fact that I think Justin Fields will be better. And that's if I'm wrong, I would love to be wrong about that. I would love for him to be exactly the same. Um, Jordan Love is a wild card. Has he been developing this whole time? He's actually good to go, or is there a reason why they never pulled the trigger on Aaron Rodgers to begin with? And it's because Jordan Love isn't quite right, or quite ready to really take the reins in Green Bay. And then I'm not worried about Minnesota at all. I think offensively they'll probably be a problem still. Defensively, I don't know if they even still have players left. All right. Defensively, like I feel like Minnesota has gone through the greatest purge of defensive talent that I've ever seen, and none of it makes sense. None of it makes sense of what Minnesota is doing defensively. But well, actually, no, there's one thing that I've been thinking that Minnesota is trying to do. I think Minnesota is like flat out trying to tank, and I think they're trying to get Caleb Williams. I think they want the number one pick, and they want to go out and get the best quarterback in this draft, and pair him up with Justin Jefferson, because I think they, like a lot of people have been saying, I think they finally came around to like Kirk Cousins is what he is. He can probably get you to the playoffs, but he'll never probably get you to a Super Bowl. So why not tear it down, get a young guy that has a lot of potential that you can pair with one of the greatest wide receivers in the NFL and see if that's a better fit. Um, so that's like on one hand, it'll be awesome to see Minnesota suffer. On the other hand, it's going to suck if they get the first pick. Absolutely going to suck. Um, so Perry Ball saying Seahawks are a tough game. The Falcons could be a tough game too. If Mr. Robinson runs wild. Yeah, I mean, I guess the thing that has me confident about the Falcons game is that I'm not worried about Desmond Ritter at all. Um, and I think if they're going to just try to run the ball at you, if they're going to try to pull a Carolina Panthers, I just think you're better prepared for that type of scheme. And again, you're going to be playing at home, so there's not going to have to, you don't have to worry about the elements, you don't have to worry about crappy field conditions. So I think things will be in a much better place. Um, when you play Atlanta. And I just like Ford Field was rocking last year. And I think it's going to be one of those stadiums that people are just not going to want to play at in 2023. Um, Mark Louis saying, I have a gut feeling that the Lions at home after a long week will beat Seattle. And I do too. I think like there's more preparation that can go into that. I think your secondary is just better prepared for that matchup of DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett. They have more weapons. Kenneth Walker is at least proved to be a high quality running back. So hopefully, like going against Kansas City, like hopefully we get a lot of indications that this defense is much improved and that they're capable of hanging with these top tier offenses and being able to limit them. Um, that's honestly like the biggest concern, and I think that's going to have to be checked out fairly early. Um, is how well this defense is playing. If this defense is playing well, I am very confident that the Lions can have a really hot start to the season. The other thing that I really wanted to get into when looking at the schedule, if we're talking about the Lions having a really good year and being optimistic about the season, then there's one question that I have for you guys, and I'm interested in seeing what everybody's answer is. And that's this. Do you think the Lions can handle being the hunted this year? Right? For so many seasons, we talk about the Lions being overlooked. We talk about people not paying attention to them. But when you come off of a season where you won 8 out of your last 10, when everybody in the national media so far is is picking you to win the division, picking you to go to the playoffs and actually like winning a playoff game, this is new territory for me as a Lions fan, I know for sure. And it's something that when I look at the schedule and even though I can see wins and I can see double digit wins, the one caveat that like you can't predict or the one thing that you can't necessarily measure or um form an opinion about just by looking at the schedule is like how will this team handle the pressure of being everybody's favorite, right? Are they going to get too high? Are they going to start feeling themselves? I remember last year that was something that Dan Campbell said, and like it showed itself when they went into Carolina and got the ball ran down their throats. I'm not saying that they can't, but I do think it's again a caveat that we have to be kind of careful about when we're talking about like, hey, this team can absolutely win 12, 13. Again, I've seen some people say 14 games. That requires a different level of focus. That requires a different level of mentality to not to understand that like, hey, you're going to get every team's best shot. There's not going to be any more of this, hey, it's the Lions, we expect to win. No, people are going to be like, hey, this is a team that could absolutely light us up offensively. And if the defense does pick up, like, hey, this is a defense that could actually get after our quarterback and cause us problems, you're not going to be able to sneak up on people. I guess is the easiest way of saying that. And that's going to be something that's going to be very interesting to watch how Dan Campbell and this team handles that. When you go into a lot of games, obviously they're not favored against Seattle, or I mean against Kansas City, but could you imagine if they beat Kansas City? If they beat Kansas City, you're going to probably be favored in every game until what, Baltimore? So again, how do you adjust to that pressure? How do you mentally um attack games knowing that like, hey, people are expecting you to win versus like, hey, go in there and put out your best effort and be gritty and steal a win. Um Very well saying they don't have a choice. They will do it or they won't. Um And I agree with you. The games are not played on paper. The Lions proved games are won on the field will stay healthy this year. And those are two things, right? There's health, and then there's the idea that again, you have to have this mental edge and be prepared and continue to prepare the same way. Whether you're winning or whether you're losing, that's one thing that Dan Campbell and this coaching staff is going to have to hammer home is that like guys, no matter how the season is going, we still have to prepare the same way. We still have to attack each opponent with the same mentality. Um, Mark LeBay saying this team has a more stable core than any Lions team I've ever watched. I agree. And I think if that's what has you confident, which is what you're saying, I'm more confident than other years that they can handle the ups and downs. And I think, like, again, the fact that you have a head coach that knows how to stay even keel, the fact that you have what used to be a young core, but like again, like a lot of these guys have been together, they understand what it was like to be at the bottom. And then they most of them got to experience, again, a slow start to the season, but understanding like how it's beneficial to keep fighting and keep getting better week in and week out so that you can have a productive into the season. Tony Chase was good with you, man, saying old Lions leadership. I would be worried. I believe Dan and these young guys will love to take on the challenge. Last Green Bay showed me everything I needed to see. And I agree. I think there's enough if you are sitting here saying like absolutely, absolutely they can handle being the hunted. Um I think there's proof in the pudding in that situation. We saw it with Green Bay. We saw it when they like when the chips were on the table and it was like, "Hey, you guys need to keep winning to make the playoffs." And the Lions did it. Yes, they stumbled in Carolina, and Dan even kind of came out and said like, "Hey, yeah, we probably were starting to feel ourselves a little too much, right? We weren't preparing the same way. We didn't have the same attitude going into that game." Well, now you know the consequences of that. You've experienced that. You know what it's like when you're feeling yourself too much. Now it's all right. You've experienced it, you felt it. Now you know what not to do. Attack every game with the same mentality. Work, grind, and be better week to week. So I don't know. Like I'm excited for the season. Um, I think there's some more things that are going to come out as the year kind of goes along, as we see what the roster is looking like. Either become more confident or hopefully this team can stay healthy because I think that is the biggest thing. That would be the biggest thing that would probably like hurt my confidence in what the Lions will do this year. So knocking on wood for that one, that everybody stays as healthy as they possibly can. Marcus Bay saying my biggest concern right now is that the Lions are thin at wide receiver. JMO is the only guy who can stretch the field. Yeah, yeah. I mean, they obviously drafted Antoine Green, who at North Carolina was a deep threat. Um, there um they also again signed a UDFA Dylan Drummond, who again is a smaller wide receiver, but I'm sure he probably has some ability to probably play the deep ball. Khalif has always been a good deep threat for them. And then again, you've added you may be short at the wide receiver spot, but you've added enough weapons in both Jameer Gibbs and Sam Laporta, where I think you can still have a very versatile um, passing attack to where, again, maybe it's not those one shots, to the end zone, but you have enough weapons to pick apart a defense and make those methodical marches down the field to get into scoring range. Uh, Perry Ball saying James Houston, KJ should be better, and the guys like Romeo and Harris should come back to form. And I think that's what you're hoping for, right? As far as from a defensive perspective, if Hutch, Kirby, and Houston can continue to just get us a little bit better, right? We're not asking for these guys to go from rookies to all pro. If they can do it, awesome. Obviously, we'll take it. But again, being just a little bit better than you were a year ago, Aiden showing that he can, win his one-on-one matchups, the fact that he can understand how to have a an effective pass rush plan. James Houston being able to contribute on not just third downs, but also contributing in the run game would be huge for them. And then Kirby just has to continue being Kirby, in my opinion. Like, continue to have that swagger. Maybe like not get so caught up in yourself, but continue to make plays in the passing game. Continue to make big hits. Continue to get interceptions. And then you have these veteran guys to provide depth, so that when you have certain matchups and maybe Romeo is a better option, on the edge than maybe, James Houston or whatever. You have those guys in the rotation that you can kind of rotate through. BD Buster saying feeling like I feel like our window is now. Um, that's why I wanted Williams. And again, like there's such a strong argument to be made for that, right? For it to just be like, yo, who knows what the future holds, but right now you have a need a defensive tackle and there's a defensive tackle that's potentially on the market. Go out and get that defensive tackle. Uh BT saying, gosh, yeah, Goff and Josh. I combine Goff and Josh. Goff and Josh Reynolds about to connect great against KC. Man, so I did my video again with about why Lions fans should be excited about the KC Lions matchup, and that was one of the points that I brought up is like Jared Goff and Josh Reynolds have been in this matchup before. Jared Goff has gone toe to toe with Patrick Mahomes and come out on top. Now, I get it. It's X amount of years ago. Both players have grown. Both players have achieved different things in that time span. But I have so much confidence in Ben Johnson to be able to scheme up a good offense, and I have a great amount of confidence for Jared Goff to go out there and execute that concept. I think we're in for like fireworks. Week 1, I don't know if it's gonna rival the Monday night game, but I expect this to be highly competitive. And hopefully the defense just shows up to limit Kansas City enough so that the Lions can come out with a win. Um, Joel C saying defense is going to be key to the hot start. Can't wait to see what they're made of for the first 4 games. Offense doesn't worry me. Ben is the genius we've all been praying for. Couldn't say it any better, right? Defense is going to be key. I trust Ben to. There's not a team on our schedule that I'm like, we shouldn't be able to put points up against. Like, I feel like there's not a single one. Like, even Kansas City, I don't think we're going to struggle to put up points against. Maybe New Orleans. New Orleans like sneak like New Orleans defense is like sneaky. They'll have games where like they're not all that impressive, but then they'll have these other games where they really lock people down. So, um, yeah, I'm a little. That would be the only game I'd be a little concerned about. Everybody else, I'm super confident that we can go up there and be the top 5 offense that we were a season ago. You're returning a lot of the same pieces. Obviously, when JMO gets back, um, he's supposed to be back, I think, for the Baltimore game. Who knows if he plays the Baltimore game? I would continue to do what you did last year, roll him out there for a couple plays because the dude gets open. Like, say what you want about what he does in his personal life. JMO's speed is legit to where it's like you either account for it and keep a safety deep, or he's going to burn your entire defense. So, um, super excited to get him back. Hopefully, like I said, hopefully he plays against Baltimore. If not, I'm very confident that we'll see him Monday night against the Raiders. And I mean, what better way to also put on a show than showing out on Monday night? Um, all right, guys. So we're already closing in on an hour. So I want to get to these rookie comps because I could hang out here all night with you guys, read your comments, continue to go back and forth. But I want to get to these rookie comps because I'm actually like really excited about this one. This one kind of caught me off guard. I'm not gonna lie to you. I did watch tape on Hendon Hooker before any of this, but the tape that I watched was specifically from like the QB school and watching him critique Hendon Hooker. And so he was high on him in certain areas, but then he's also like was like dinging him for the fact that like the offense that Tennessee ran and using that kind of against him as a question mark of like I'm not sure how good he is. And so for me, that kind of gave me like a bad taste in regards to Hendon Hooker because it's like, well, if you're only a system quarterback, what if the system that you're going to run in Detroit, or not even just in Detroit, because we hadn't even drafted him yet, but who knows if the system that you're going to run in the NFL is actually going to lend itself to your skill set? Well, doing a deep dive, watching his actual game tape for myself, nobody else's commentary, literally just looking at it with my own 2 eyes and making observations, I was absolutely blown away, right? Truly, truly blown away. I can see, well, I ain't gonna say that. I don't know why Luke says that he's Patrick Mahomes, but I see why Luke is so high on him. Hendon Hooker does things at the quarterback position or did things at the quarterback position in Tennessee that would make you think that if he didn't have a torn ACL and was still 25, he would have went in the first round. And I'm kind of convinced after watching his tape and everything, I'm convinced that the Lions would have taken him at 18 instead of Jack Campbell. I think they still would have taken Gibbs because if Holmes is saying Gibbs was their number one guy, I will tend to believe him. But I think if you had a healthy Hendon Hooker going through the draft process and he, for whatever reason, had fallen because of his age, because I do think people would have passed on him just because of the simple fact that he's 25. I really do. If he would have fell to 18, I'm so convinced now, more than ever, that the Lions would have taken him at 18. Big T saying I'm high on him too. I agree with Luke on that. Perryball also saying Hooker is a risk/reward pickup. He was good value in the third round if he develops great. If he doesn't, it was worth the risk. And again, like he's a guy that has a pretty volatile like floor and ceiling for me. I think his ceiling is crazy high. Not as high as Luke's, but like not as high as Luke thinks it is, but it is high. It is very, very good. And his floor is serviceable. Like it's something where you'll still look back at the pick and be like, you know what, that was fine for a third round pick. So I'm gonna quit. Well, before I jump into my what I think he is, Steve was saying, listen to Mike Martz has to say about Hooker on the 33rd YouTube channel. He has some high praise for Hooker and Gibbs. I'll have to check that out because that was one thing when I was doing. So when I do these comparisons, I try my best not to look at other people's comparisons for these players. Trying to just go off of film. I'm trying to get better at watching film. So if you guys actually have like, um, content creators or people that you actually like really highly value as people that break down film, go ahead and throw them in the chat because I would love to get better at watching film. Right? I didn't play football at the highest level, but I love this sport so much. I love doing this. I love being able to provide content for you guys. So I want to make sure that as a content creator, and as somebody that's looking to contribute to this community, that I'm doing it at the highest level, at the highest of high levels. So yeah, if you guys know of anybody that does great film breakdowns, definitely let me know who those people are so I can definitely, continue to do some studying and get better in that respect. But my ceiling for Hendon Hooker, and you guys gonna have to tell me in the chat if I'm crazy or not. Please tell me if I'm crazy. My ceiling for Hendon Hooker is Joe Burrow. I from the first clip for the first game that I watched, which was Tennessee versus Alabama this past year. Oh my God. Did it looked like Tennessee was playing Madden on rookie. That's how crazy those first few plays that Hendon Hooker has in that game, that's how crazy they are. The throws that he was making, I was sitting here like there's first of all with so much ease, right? There's not a lot of wind up in the throw. It's not this ridiculous like drop back. It's literally shotgun, step, sees a guy open and just deep shot. And I'm like, that's not supposed to happen to Alabama. There's not many teams that I've watched that just made Alabama's defense just look average. And in Hendon Hooker in that Tennessee offense was lighting him up. And for me, because Super Saiyan Lion was good with you, man. First of all, you jumped in and you're gonna hit me with a hell no. Like I don't even get a what up, Miko first. Like I got hell no off the start. I thought we were better than that. But I'm gonna tell you why. Because it's not just the big throws, right? I had a couple notes down as far as again why I think Hendon Hooker is like that good, why I would give him that comp. First of all, let's start with the arm, right? Cannon, right? He was injured, so he didn't get a chance to showcase it in pro days or at the combine, excuse me, or any of those things. But when you watch him in the game, Tennessee is able to run the offense they were able to run because Hendon Hooker can make those throws easily. Again, it's not like he doesn't have to throw his entire body into it. It's not this ridiculous windup. It is effortless for him to be able to hit these deep shots. And I just like when you sit there and you watch it, we're just like, dude, if If Hendon Hooker was 21, we would have been talking about him going first overall over Bryce Young. Like that's how talented he looked in those moments. He can literally, so again, cannon of an arm. I believe like some of the throws that he was making, like he can literally get you a touchdown from anywhere. Anywhere on the field. If he gets a man open deep, count it as 6. Like he's almost automatic in that sense. Um, I think he has great poise in the pocket, right? Again, some of it is the nature of Tennessee's offense, but there are games you can watch the Georgia game, you can watch the Alabama game, you can watch the LSU game or the Florida game where there is pressure coming in on him and he'll wait as long as he can and then he'll make an escape or he'll make a really tough throw even though he has pressure in his face. Like he doesn't get rattled. And if you guys have seen any of my content that I was doing over at the Questionable podcast when we used to talk about Jared Goff, one of my biggest gripes about Jared Goff, specifically in his first year here, was that Jared doesn't handle pressure well. The best way to beat Jared Goff is to get pressure around him because he will fold. He doesn't know how to escape the pocket well. He doesn't like to make throws with people in his face. He was a little bit better at that this past year, but for the most part, like that still remains true. Look at the New England game. They got pressure on him, they got in his face, and he unraveled. And trust me, I get that that's true for most quarterbacks, but there are other quarterbacks like Hendon Hooker, like Joe Burrow, where when pressure starts to come in on them, they still have enough poise and enough like control of themselves emotionally to be able to make you know, a highly contested throw down the field. Um, let me get some of your guys' feedback to my initial thought um, about Hendon Hooker being comp to Joe Burrow. Steve was saying that's dope because that's who I compared Hooker to. Okay, so I'm not crazy. I'm not crazy. Even his career has resembled Burrow's. Still, he got hurt last season. Big T saying Hooker is a football player, Dan and Brad type of guy. I agree. Tony Chase, Hooker is more decisive than Goff. Again, some of that I think is the nature of Tennessee's offense. They make it very easy on him to catch, make reads, and make the proper throw. And I that may not be like the ideal quarterback for most teams, but for a team like the Lions with Ben Johnson, who I think literally had to do that for Jared Goff, had to make things easy on him so that he didn't have to do too much thinking, so that he didn't have to do too much, patting the ball in the pocket, that he could actually make, simple dropbacks and throws. This will be ideal for Hendon Hooker for years to come. Uh Perry Ball saying Holmes was willing to take the risk. The Rams did the same with Todd Gurley. I mean, I'm assuming you mean that in regards to Jameer Gibbs. And yeah, like it paid off for them, so hopefully it pays off in the same way. There goes my what up. Super Saiyan Line, what's good with you, man? Appreciate you coming by. Um, Mark LeBay saying, I think it's a good risk, but don't get carried away. Most teams don't think he has the potential to be a top 10 QB, or they would have drafted him in the first despite an ACL. I agree with you. So when I get to his floor, because I like it's not just like his ceiling is his ceiling. That's why we have ceilings and floors for players. And I think that's why we should always look at players in that context of like you have a ceiling and you have a floor. The reason Hendon Hooker went in the third round versus like even the second, like Will Levis, is that there are things in his game that you can look at and be like, oh, okay, that's probably what kept him from being drafted in the first round. But I do think for the most part, his ACL injury and his age and a couple of these like limiters in his game, yes, is what kind of caused him to fall to the third round. I think if he doesn't have the ACL, and I think if he's 3 years younger, so if he's 22, you probably still see him get drafted at the end of the first round, even with the things that he's not good at. Just because the things that he's so good at, people would have been in love with, and they would have done the same thing they do with every other quarterback that has a great depth of talent, where it's like, oh, I can fix X, Y, and Z. Right? People easily explain away that they can fix things when you believe that you have the time constraint to do so. Well, with a quarterback that's already 25 and that's coming off an ACL, you're losing a year. So the developmental window is smaller for Hendon Hooker, and some teams I don't think were comfortable with that, even in the second round. So, and the Lions got him near the top of the third, so it's not like he went deep into the third before he got picked. Big T saying he can throw deep and make great decisions, read defenses, and he can literally do everything. People sleeping on Hendon Hooker. Also saying he agrees with me. Appreciate that. Um, let me see who else we got in here. John Fisher saying I saw JG take a few on the chin this past season to make a big throw, and he did. Like I'm not saying that he can't, but I still don't think it's his strong suit. I still think because of I don't think Jared Goff has Hendon Hooker's arm, and I still think you can easily rattle him because he's not as mobile as Hendon Hooker. So if you're able to get pressure around him, you still have a much high. I think you have a much higher chance of him doing something like stupid with the ball, whether it be a fumble or just making an errant pass that he shouldn't make. Um, Super Saiyan Lion saying, "Do you think Hooker is better than Pickett?" I do. I do think he's better than Kenny Pickett. Absolutely. Um, and I think again he would have gone in the first round had it not been for an ACL injury and him being 25. I think he's again if he's 23, 22, like he's drafted at the end of the first round. He's probably like I said. I think he gets picked by the Lions at 18. I really do. Um, Debt Fan Man saying if Hooker hits the expected ceiling, it would eliminate the future extension need for golf, opening a window for a QE trade and sign. Um, Let his cap hit us before Hook's contract. And this is why somebody has said it earlier in the stream about again, because we talked about trading for Quentin Williams, and this is a reason why I would. Because what you see in Hendon Hooker's ceiling is worth it if he can if during training camp, if during his redshirt year, if he's showing you enough signs that he's picking up the game mentally, if he's showing his ability to understand offensive concepts, understand checks and reads and all of that type of stuff, I think there's enough there for you to be like, yo, we can take this gamble because this kid will be ready. And I say kid, he'll be 26 next year. Like this grown man is ready to lead a team. Um, and he has the physical tools to do so as a passer, like not just as a runner, because what he's able to do running the ball is also great. He can still hurt you with his legs. He's not Justin Fields or anything like that, but he's very Joe Burrow like where he can take an open lane. He can take a QB draw if everybody for some reason had fallen asleep and forgot like, oh, he runs. He'll go out there and he'll get you 10, 12 yards off of a QB draw. Right? You can run halfback options type of stuff. You can run QB reads and things like that. He'll be solid um in QB sneak situations because he's just a little bit better with his legs. Um, some other things that he's really good at. He has good timing on his routes, right? I think again, it's both a pro and a con of Tennessee's offense. Everything is timing based. Everything is like, hey, this person should be open on this route, so wait for them and then make this throw. Well, he's good at that. He's good at understanding timing and understanding, okay, this guy should be coming open at this time and delivering the ball at that exact time. And then the other thing that you love and you absolutely need in a quarterback is from everything that we've heard about Hendon Hooker, he is a great leader. He is a great teammate. He's the type of guy. Hell, I heard it from Minicamp that like he's not practicing, he's not able to engage or participate. Participate. He's not able to participate in rookie minicamp, but he's still like cheering on the guys, giving guys high fives as they kind of come in off the season. Um, or off the field after like certain drills and things of that nature. So I think there's a lot of like upside to a Hendon Hooker in that regard. So it's like he has the physical tools. He can play the position at a high level and he has the leadership characteristics that you want in a franchise quarterback. It's a thing that like again, it's the mental part. It's like can he translate from what they did at Tennessee to what we do in the NFL because everything is faster. And it's like and this is the thing that I also wanted to say. I say that about Hendon Hooker, but that's true about every rookie quarterback. The same thing is going to be said about Bryce Young. The same thing is going to be said or is being said about CJ Stroud. The same thing is going to be said about Anthony Richardson. These guys clearly have the physical tools to do so. They have to adjust mentally to the game. And I just have a strong feeling that Hendon Hooker can do that. right? He's mature enough. He understands. I'm sure he's hearing it and seeing it on in the media about his age, so he understands like his window of opportunity and his um the amount of errors he can make are very small. If he wants to be a starting quarterback in this league, he has to get this offense down. And I think if he gets the offense down and he's healthy, yeah, I think he could beat Jared Goff for the starting quarterback job. I genuinely believe that if all of these things check themselves off and he plays to the capability of his ceiling, the only thing Jared Goff would be able to do to keep Hendon Hooker from taking his job is win the Super Bowl. In my opinion, that is all Jared Goff would be able to do to be able to hold off Hendon Hooker based off of the potential that I see. Um, so with that said, I know I've gone on and I probably irritated some of you with my talk of what his ceiling could be. John Fisher saying, but I still think Hooker's ceiling is higher. Just think Goff's processing and system understanding is better and will be this year and next at least. It definitely will be this year, right? Next year, next year we'll have to see because literally, like that's all Hendon Hooker is going to have time to do is learn the system. So you're getting a guy that's going to spend every day on this team learning the system, spending time with Mark Brunell, spending time with JT Barrett, spending time with Ben Johnson, learning the offense, watching Jared Goff perform and prepare. And then like I just think his physical tools are better. I genuinely do. I think his physical tools are better than Goff's. And so you get that into a camp battle setting. If Dan Campbell is going to be true to his word and that the best guys will play, I have a hard time seeing how Hendon Hooker doesn't beat him out for the job in camp. I really do. I have a much um harder time for that. Mark, okay, listen, Mark, I'm gonna challenge you on this. Hooker's comp is Goff with a better arm and mobility. If he has a better arm and mobility, he's not Jared Goff at this point. He's no longer Jared Goff because that is why Jared Goff is who he is. He's functional in a system. His arm is somewhere between average and like I'll say it's average. I don't want to be disrespectful. It's average, right? And his mobility is non-existent. If you add mobility and you add a much better arm, he's no longer Jared Goff. He's somebody else. And in my mind, he's Joe Burrow at that point. All right. So that's who we got at the ceiling. So who is his floor? So this goes back to what Mark was saying that like, hey, if teams believed in him so much, if his ceiling was truly that, he wouldn't have fell to the third round. And this is the thing. He does have weaknesses in his game. There are things in his game that you just kind of can't ignore. And when you look at his floor and you look at how if again, we always have to look at least I do. I look at the floor as you're not able to build upon the things that you did in college. If he's not able to build upon the things he did in college, to me, you're looking at Tyrod Taylor for Hendon Hooker, right? He will be a bigger version of Tyrod Taylor, where Tyrod Taylor is a guy who has started for teams on, in situations. He has come in, he's won games, he's put together some great moments for teams, and he's looked very capable of leading a team, but not quite good enough to be like a franchise quarterback. And this is where Luke and I disagree because Luke, I think, believes that Hendon Hooker's floor is Dak Prescott. Well, Dak Prescott is still a franchise quarterback. And for me, that's not what I see Hendon Hooker as. Hendon Hooker is either he'll end up being one of the best quarterbacks in the league, a la Joe Burrow, or he's going to be just one of the best backup quarterbacks that you can get in the league, where it's like everybody would want Hendon Hooker on their team because they know they're getting a professional. They know they're getting somebody that can come in and handle their offense and be able to perform at a high level when called upon. But the reason why this is his floor is because there are a couple things that Hendon Hooker doesn't do well. So like I said, he has great poise in the pocket, but at the same time, because again, I do chalk more of this up to Tennessee's system. Because he is so focused on making the reads that he has to make in the passing game, he's expecting guys to get open at a certain point of time. He sometimes misreads blitzes. And so that causes him to take unnecessary sacks where it's like, yo, if you had identified that blitzer ahead of time, you probably could have shifted, you could have shifted coverage, you could have audibled into a different play. And it's just like that happens a little too frequently. Specifically, if you look at the LSU tape, if you look at the Georgia tape, they really kind of rattle him with like this pressure from different places. And I think because Hendon Hooker was in a system that was so just like ironclad that he had to make these reads at this time, you weren't able to see if he was able to again adjust to those things. Um One other issue that he kind of has. So while he is mobile, he's definitely more mobile than a Jared Goff or some of these more traditional pocket passers. He's not great at making throws on the run. Like he can escape the pocket, but a lot of these like escape the pockets and then he has to make a throw across his body type of stuff doesn't do very well. They're either too high, they're too low. They're just like his teammates maybe just aren't expecting the ball to come at him the way they are. And so that's where you kind of get this like component where it's like, okay, that part of his game has to kind of get better. Um, Mark LeBay asking, so Hooker's ceiling is better than Joe Burrow? No, I said it's Joe Burrow. Like that's who he is. Like if he hits, that's who I think he can be. Um, oh, you're making the point that Jared Goff is better than Joe Burrow. Wait, okay, but if you're gonna add the caveat that short pass consistency, then he's not like that's one component of being an entire quarterback. That's no, we're not doing that. No. Um, but no, like I think in the sense of where Joe Burrow or sorry, now you got me saying Joe Burrow, and where Hendon Hooker's floor is, like that's another thing that he just doesn't do well is throw on the run. Um, he like again, while he has this strong arm, he has the same thing that plagues a lot of quarterbacks that have strong arms, which is occasionally like that accuracy goes out the window on some of these deep throws or on some of these throws that should be like somewhat routine, and you're just like, hey, why why weren't you able to hit that throw um, more consistently? I think it specifically shows up across the middle when he has to make passes. Like again, if he's throwing a slant, cool. But if he was running like some of these dig routes that they ran at Tennessee, he was struggling to hit with some consistency. Again, I specifically would have you guys look at like the LSU game and the Georgia game where they weren't allowing Hendon Hooker to take a lot of deep shots. They played a lot of like really tight man um on the defensive end, and he has to make these really like precise throws to guys across the middle. And it's like these guys are open, or he could make these throws if he can just place the ball in the right spot. But he just didn't do it consistently enough for me to be like, okay, or at least he did it inconsistent enough for me to sit there and be like, you know what, that's not a strong suit of his. Um, and lastly, again, coming from the system that he came from, you have to wonder can he make his progressions fast enough? Watch his tape, you will notice that there's a lot of times wherever like whichever way Hendon Hooker's head starts looking, so if he's looking at the left side of the field, he rarely comes back right. He rarely is going from left to middle to right. He will go from left and it's either high, low, and then he's running. The NFL, you're going to have to make more reads than that. You're going to have to, and you're just going to have to be faster. You're going to have to go left, right, middle, check down, whatever, and be able to process this, be able to process those things quicker so that you can keep your offense going. And if you can't do that, you're going to find yourself in situations where you're taking sacks, where you're getting strip fumbles, and or just overall making bad throws. Those are concerns that I have for Hendon Hooker. And again, this is what would make his floor kind of rear its ugly head. But the things that he does well, right? Like, while I'm concerned about his floor, what he does well, he does it so consistently. And it really does become when you hear Dan Campbell talk about, like, hey, we just got to get him. He has to learn the NFL game. That to me is like the only thing that's like that is going to make or break Hendon Hooker's career. If he can't adjust to NFL speed, if he can't adjust to NFL defenses, he is going to be a backup quarterback, a highly sought after one that could be really effective for you in the event that your quarterback goes down. But he will have his limitations. Um, Really quick, I was going on a ramble there for a while, so let me just check out what some of you guys are saying in the chat. John Fisher saying, "I think Hooker being thrown in off talent too early could lead to a Geno Smith stunted growth cycle, though I highly doubt that'll happen. I trust the management to handle both Goff and Hooker correctly." And I agree. And I think that's one of the reasons why the Lions loved taking him when they took him is because there is no pressure. You literally can go into a situation. You don't have to worry about having the pressure on your back to win a Super Bowl or to keep this team in contention. You can learn from a veteran who has done it, who has gotten to a Super Bowl, and you can see how he's going to operate within this offense. And you have talent around you where again you're not expected to be a savior, but instead you're just asked to maximize the talent that's around you. Um, Saw this earlier. I had to call this one out. Casey saying Hooker's ceiling is Charlie Batch. We're not doing that, Casey. I'm not going to allow that. I'm not going to allow that at all. He is not. That is inaccurate. That's false information. Um, Perry Ball saying we have good weapons and O line, so Hooker could do well. I think so well. And again, those are the things when you look at okay, well, why was he successful at Tennessee? Well, he has a great offensive line there at Tennessee, and he had really highly touted offensive weapons that were good at the things they asked him to do. Jalen Hyatt was kind of like their Amon-Ra St. Brown. He could go deep, but he could also like operate across the middle on slants and things of that nature. Then he had Cedric Tillman, which was like their true like deep threat, was one of their other deep threats. And so you look at what the Lions have, and it's like, man, he's got a lot of the same options, a lot of the same weapons, and then some, right? He'll have some options in the tight end room. He'll have two great running backs in Gibbs and Monty that can be, true weapons for that offense as well. Um BD Buster saying those things are all flexible. What you can't fix is height and price with Young. Um, height with Bryce Young. Yeah, that's that's the thing that I think separates Bryce Young from a Hendon Hooker. And I think if Hendon Hooker again had just been a little younger, like we would have really been talking about Hendon Hooker going first overall. He was clearly the best quarterback in college football last year before he got hurt. Probably would have ran away with the Heisman. People would have jumped at the opportunity to draft Hendon Hooker had he not, been dealing with that ACL. Um, Steve was saying if Goff can look good this offense, a lot of quarterbacks could look good in it. It's definitely a quarterback friendly offense. And again, that's what you're getting in Hendon Hooker, a guy who came from an offense and a system that made his job easy. Okay, well, if Goff can make this job look easy and make this offense be high powered, I have no reason in thinking that Hendon Hooker can't do the exact same. Um, Tony Chase saying our O line is the best situation for a rookie QB for years to come. Even if Hooker ain't the guy, I love our situation, and I think that again, that's the commodity that you're able to give this team, or that's something that this team is able to lean on in their decision. Because like Dan and Brad have both kind of said, like, hey, we're not rushing this decision on Goff, right? We're not hard pressed to replace him right now. But you also are in this position where like, but you can take a quarterback that you believe has a lot of upside that you could develop for a year or two. And again, in my opinion, if Hendon Hooker picks it up mentally, don't be surprised if it's next year. I just truly believe that. But yeah, because of the weapons and the offensive line that you have available to you, you are able to take this quarterback that is a rookie that'll be like a first time starter in the NFL and not ask him to do a whole lot. Some of these other quarterbacks that have gotten drafted, Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, Anthony Richardson, like they're being thrown in the fire, and it's no fault of their own. I mean, that's sometimes the price you pay for being a high profile quarterback that's being drafted high in the NFL draft. But you some of those guys aren't going into situations where they have great offensive lines, where they have, an array of weapons to kind of, operate with. Um, Hendon Hooker is going to have that, and I think that's going to make it easier for him to impress this coaching staff and to be able to find a rhythm and be successful for this team. Um, Casey saying Holmes at worst filled the backup QB spot for the next year with Hooker and potential for a decent mid-quality starter, depending on what happens with Goff for the next 2 seasons. And I agree. Like, again, at his worst, like, if he turns out to be Tyrod Taylor, you at least know that you have a backup quarterback that can win you games, right? Tyrod Taylor is that type of quarterback that can come in, win a few games, and keep your team afloat while, your starting quarterback is dealing with an injury. Um, and because of, like, again, of how well crafted this offense is, you feel fairly confident that he can perform at a high level within it. Um, Mark LeBay saying, I love Hooker, but if I had to place a bet, Hooker never exceeds Goff. I'd take that bet because I feel like the bar to exceed Goff isn't as high as some people might think it is. I don't think it's that high, right? Obviously, yes, he's gotten to a Super Bowl, but like never won an MVP, never was an all pro. There's the bar is not as high as for some quarterbacks. That's all I'm saying. All I'm saying. Um, and finally, we'll leave it off with Big T before we jump into Broderick Martin. Big T saying Hooker will do well with this offense and a run game. Hooker will be fine. He's our quarterback in 2024 and 25. Couldn't say it any better, right? Now, let's get to the biggest question mark of this draft. And I'm going to leave it up to you guys on how long this conversation goes because I think it's fairly straightforward. Um, and that is Broderick Martin. Broderick Martin was the defensive tackle that nobody asked for, unfortunately. Um, we all knew that the Lions needed a defensive tackle. We all had our eyes on different defensive tackles. And when the news came in that the Lions were trading up and they were trading all these draft picks to go up in the third round, I don't think there's not a single soul who would have picked Broderick Martin as the pick. But that's who it was. And so in doing, some film study on him and trying my best to find clips and find, just anything to kind of give me an idea of who he is, what his ceiling is, what his floor is. Like I said earlier in the show, there are two things that made this hard. The first thing being the position that Broderick Martin plays. He plays nose tackle. It's not a glamorous position. It's just not. And so because it's not a glamorous position, you're not going to get these these sexy highlights of him dismantling, offensive linemen and getting a sack or any of those things. And then the second thing being he played at a smaller school. So again, not on national TV a lot, not a lot of people knowing who he is and doing these elaborate breakdowns of his skill set. But with all of that in focus, still had to do an evaluation of Broderick Martin. So again, this is a ceiling that some of you might disagree with. You might say is way too high. But this is who I think Broderick Martin could be if he's, again, the best nose tackle he could possibly be for him, the best nose tackle that he could personally be. I think you would be getting a DJ Reader type of defensive tackle. DJ Reader out of Cincinnati, who, again, he's playing nose tackle. So it's this idea that he's going to be this groundbreaking defensive tackle, I don't think is necessarily in the cards for Broderick Martin. That's why so many of us or so many of you guys are talking about like, hey, maybe we just go all in for Quentin Williams. Because I think could Broderick Martin be a serviceable starter? Sure. He has the skill sets to be a really good nose tackle. He's 6'5", over 300 pounds. When you see him on tape, if you're trying to move him with one guy, it's not happening, right? He does very well at holding the point of attack and doing his job from that standpoint of plugging the middle and not allowing people to just move him out of his gap. He does that very well as far as, again, utilizing his size and his weight that well. He has great gap integrity. So again, you're not going to see him over pursuing or trying to do something that's not his job. He understands what he's called to do. He understands that he's a nose tackle that's called to plug up lanes. So you don't have to wonder where Broderick Martin's going to be. Wherever he's lined up, that gap closed. All right, closed. And because of that, if he's that much of a handful on one-on-one situations, eventually what teams are going to have to do is they're going to have to double him. And if they have to start doubling him to move him out of the way so that they can open up gaps, well, that's only going to open up more opportunities for Aleem, for your edge rushers, for your linebackers to play off of him and to be able to get the tackle for losses that you're going to need to shut down the run. And these are things that DJ Reader does really well. Again, DJ Reader, is never going to like you don't hear about DJ Reader until the playoffs come, right? Because at that point in time, it's all about him doing like all these all the dirty work that's required to start to stifle offenses. And that's what Broderick Martin will probably be if he's able to reach his ceiling where he's a guy that you can rotate in on first and second down, shut down the run, third and inches, fourth and inches type of situation. You know that like, hey, he can be a clog in the middle. One other good quality of his. So again, while he's not, again, you kind of know where he's going to be. He has really good gap integrity. He will chase down runs though. Like he doesn't give up on plays just because it's away from him. He'll continue to track down a play and at least make an attempt to try to get to the ball carrier. Again, large man. Don't expect him to get there, but at least you see that effort. He's not somebody that just gives up on a play because like, oh, okay, it's past me, cool. I'm just gonna chill here. He actually does put in the effort um to really kind of anchor down a defense. Steve O saying if Martin can anchor against double teams, the pick will be a success in my opinion. As of now, high pet level causes him to get pushed around. Exactly. And everybody kind of saying the same thing, right? Like, hey, take up double teams. I don't think Broderick Martin is a guy that we're going to be looking at and like looking at the stat sheet and being like, so did he get this many tackles for loss or did he get a sack? Like, if he gets those things, awesome. I just don't think it's something that we could really expect from him, especially in his first year. Um, Mark LeBay saying, I've watched Martin pancaking two linemen in one play, a bit of a fluke, but impressive and funny. And that's the thing. So again, that's his ceiling, right? If he can do that, he'll be able to eat up double teams and he'll be able to like really, be a force in the run game. The problem that I have is that like what Mark is saying, where he's able to like take two offensive linemen and kind of pancake them and like move them out the way. That is something I wish I saw more in Broderick Martin's tape. If he was able to be more impactful in that situation, then I think this would be a home run, like a home run pick. If we were able to turn on tape and be like, dude, he's just at 6'5, 330 or whatever he is, and he's just tossing dudes out the club, we would all be excited about what he is or what he could be. But because I don't see that enough, Broderick Martin for me, like if he doesn't really like pop off, his floor is just another rotational defensive tackle. And I know that's a ceiling, it's supposed to say floor. If he doesn't like really pop off in the NFL, he'll still just be like he'll be a dude that you bring in to spell Isaiah Buggs. Whenever Isaiah Buggs needs a blow, you'll send in Broderick Martin. He'll go in there and he'll kind of just be that guy. I don't think there's a lot of, like I said, I don't think there's a lot of hope that he'll be more than that because as a nose tackle, like he has the things that most nose tackle has. He doesn't have great quickness off the line. Um, you're not expected to put him in on pass rush situations. That's just not what he's going to be asked to do. And the reason that I think he would just fall into a rotational guy is like Broderick Martin doesn't have incredible strength. Like he needs to get stronger. That was the number one thing that I said when they drafted him is like, hey, great pick. He's got to get stronger. He's got to be able to not just take on double teams because he can take them on and probably not get moved a lot. He needs to be able to destroy them. He needs to be able to fire off the ball and make people say, oh, bleep, like every time he comes off the line because he's just going to eat up space and he's going to be a force that other offensive linemen just don't want to take, want to deal with. Prairie Ball saying, can his pad level be fixed with coaching? Absolutely. This is where, though, again, I'm sure it's going to be coached, right? Like if he has bad pad level, it's going to be harped upon. The question is, how well does he take coaching? Is he going to take that coaching well and be able to take what is being said and translate that into production on the field? If he can do that, Broderick Martin will be great, and he'll do everything that you want him to do as a nose tackle. And he'll be everything this team needs him to be as far as when it comes to defending the run. And who knows, because of his size and if he's able to be effective, he might push Isaiah Buggs out of that starting spot to where it's him and Aleem, and you at least would feel really comfortable about that tandem in the middle where it's like, yo, there's two really good run stuffers in the middle, and Aleem being the quicker of the two, where if Broderick is eating up blockers, Aleem gets way more one-on-one situations where he can probably start to exploit those and showcase his tenacity as a three tech. Um, BD Buster saying, I heard his first step is pretty nasty. I haven't watched tape on him though. Like I said, tape is hard to find on him in general. Like there's a reason why the Lions highlight reel of him is like 53 seconds. Like it's not even quite a minute because it's hard to find some tape on him. Um, and then what I saw, like I didn't see Quick get off, but again, I don't know. Quick for a guy that at his size is going to look different. It just is. So I don't want to say that he's not quick at all, but it doesn't like you won't sit there and be like, oh snap, like that was really quick. Like it just doesn't really happen that way. Um, in my opinion. Steve was saying, I'm not sure Martin can fix his pad level. I'm sure coaches have been trying to teach him that since high school. It depends though, right? Like, because when you're in high school, if you're in high school and you're Broderick Martin's size, you literally are just telling him to just be a monster because most most offensive linemen that he's playing against in high school aren't his size. Like, again, if you go and you find and you dig up Western Kentucky tape, like he's the biggest defensive tackle that they had, and he looks bigger and he's more massive than any of the offensive linemen that he's going against. I think it even came out at camp. Like he was he was dwarfing the defensive tackles that they had in camp. So these are other guys that are going into the NFL. Broderick Martin was the biggest guy there. The the issue that sometimes happened, and I brought this up when talking about Jack Campbell a couple weeks or last week, is that sometimes when you're good at one thing, technique kind of goes out the window and teams just kind of rely on your physical traits and they're just like, yeah, that works physically, so keep doing that. It happened with Will Anderson. People started questioning Will Anderson's pass rush ability because all they saw him do was be this speedy guy off the edge. But he has it. It's just why use it if you're beating everybody with speed? Um, that just tends to happen sometimes in the NFL. Mark LeBay saying at a small program, he probably had second-rate strength conditioning. Give him a year with the Lions strength and conditioning. Agreed, right? Because these are the types of things that you start to change and develop once you get into the league. We even heard Aleem say it that like once Aleem got to the league, he had to start changing his diet. He had to start, getting into the weight room. Like you start to make these types of changes because what worked in college doesn't work in the NFL. It just so you have to adapt. You have to make changes to your diet, to your strength and conditioning, um, and just your overall approach to the game. So that's my take on Broderick Martin. Like I said, if he's as good as we hope he is, DJ Reader, right? He'll be a solid, just reliable run stuffer for your defense for years to come. If he's not that great, I still think he's a rotational nose tackle, and he'll be somebody that you'll probably only see, and you'll only probably ever hear his name called when he's coming in for Isaiah Buggs, when he's like, in on like goal line situations and stuff like that. Um, he'll still be a serviceable nose tackle. He'll just never be like a starter type of guy. And again, nose tackle is a position that's not very glorified. It's very similar to like most offensive lineman spots where like no one talks about you unless you're doing your job poorly. If Broderick Martin is doing his job well, probably won't hear a whole lot about him because everybody else around him will be making plays. And the only time that you'll probably get to like hear his name called is if it's something in a replay and it's like, oh yeah, Broderick Martin is the reason that this actually happened. And that's why Aiden was able to get this tackle for loss or was able to get this sack, or that's why Jack Campbell was able to make this play on the running back, is because Broderick Martin did X, Y, and Z. But I'm with Big T as well. Like for all of these rookies, for everybody that I'm doing evaluation on, I hope he's good. I hope that whatever their vision is for him, that he's able to come into this to the team and execute that at a high level. But yeah, guys, like that's kind of my thoughts. That's my thoughts on Hendon Hooker. That's my thoughts on Broderick Martin. If you joined the stream late, definitely go back and check out my thoughts on Hendon Hooker. I appreciate everybody coming through. Please be sure to hit that like button. Like I said, like that really helps out the channel. If you're new around here, subscribe. I'm still going to be continuing to put out really good content. I'm going to obviously break up some of the stream tonight because this is a long one. Did not expect to stream this long, but I'll break this up so that those of you guys can go back and and watch some of the clips here and there. I have a couple more videos that I'm gonna be uploading as well this week. So definitely keep an eye on those. But no, man, I appreciate all of you guys. Woke up this morning, saw that I hit 100 subs on YouTube. I appreciate every last one of you, every last person that subscribed to get me to that first 100. After my first week of streaming, greatly appreciate you guys. Appreciate again all of you guys hanging out this long. But yeah, hit the like button on the way out, hit the subscribe button if you haven't already, and I will see you guys on Wednesday for another stream. So yeah, appreciate all of you.